you haven't used Snowflake, I'll do a few slides to explain that, but the other half, if you're in optimization, this is the place to be. I mean, I'm probably one of the top experts in the world with this, just because I spent the last 4 years doing this all the time. So anyway, it's really marketing for Snowflake, I think, part of it, but it's cool. I actually thought this program was going to be dumb, but this data superheroes, there's 48 in the world. There's only about 15 in the US. And it really just means that you've done a lot of Snowflake stuff and you write about it and you advocate for it. But they do give you these cool shirts and shoes. And we get to present it like if you're familiar with Snowflake, maybe some of you made it to Snowflake Summit that just came. So for those of you who haven't used Snowflake, I'm gonna introduce some of the basic concepts. So I've been doing data type stuff probably more than any of you, or pretty long, since the mid 90s. I originally did it when I first started Air Force on Oracle. And I ran my own consulting practice for about 20 years in data warehouses, big data. And when I came across Snowflake, it really was something different. And that's why I've spent so much effort on it and really invested in it. So I'll give you my background, why Snowflake, for users who don't know it, kind of the evolution of where it's come. One of the things, mostly what I'm talking about though, is how to optimize it, mostly around the cost. It's amazing because if you had worked on other databases before, like Teradata and Netezza, any of the on-prem databases, SQL Server, Oracle Exadata, there was always limits of how it could grow. And also, really, for a small organization, it was not really affordable for big data. But Snowflake really changed that by the differentiators that I'll go into. So they have consumption-based pricing, which made it, or for startups, I can spend $50 a month, or if I'm AT&T, I spend $2 million a month. So I'll go in a lot into the optimizations. So the half of you that actually have used Snowflake, this should be really valuable. And I'm going to talk about cost, performance, security, and automated tools associated with it, as well as manual tools that you can use as well. So I'm just going to skip through this. Last year I wrote a book called Snowflake Essentials. I'm part-time with Accenture. Like I said, I ran my own consulting company for about 20 years in LA. I did pretty well. We sold it in 2019, and then it was eventually acquired by Accenture. I decided to stay like half-time at Accenture, so that was okay. So I focused really on Snowflake data thought leadership. Like I said, I've been doing Snowflake for the last 4.5 years or so. Besides working for Accenture, after I sold the consulting company, I'm still doing some SaaS products. So I actually am the one who started the Snowflake users group. So if you're interested in that, I'll have the link. And we have meetings in LA. We had a lot of good meetings before COVID. We've only had like one since then, but we're going to start it up some more. And we've also built this a bunch of different tools that run on top of Snowflake. So I already did this. For all of you that are here, besides if you're not using Snowflake, what databases are you using? Anybody, are you using Oracle? Are you mostly using cloud? Who's using cloud databases besides Snowflake? Anybody using RDBMS, Oracle, SQL Server? Okay. For those of you who are on that, it's really valuable to go. So why is Snowflake, why am I even here, right? So about 4 years ago, like I said, I was running this practice. We had done data warehouses for a lot of big companies, pretty sizable data warehouses. One of our big customers in LA was AG and also Ticketmaster. We did a lot in live events, and those are pretty sizable data warehouses where over the years they had started on Oracle, then went to Teradata, but all those systems couldn't scale. So what I want you to leave you with this slide is that Snowflake, they started off as just a database, but now it can really handle all sorts of workloads. And for me personally, I really have never seen anything scale as well as it. There's different competitors that are trying to get into the marketplace, but because of this technology they use, that I'll talk about some 8-point differentiators, they've created this unified system. So if you've used Oracle or SQL Server or MySQL, it wasn't always easy to connect different databases. For Snowflake, it's just a big cloud. So anything within a cloud region, you can query or you can join thousands of tables, which really wasn't easy to do on other systems at scale. So it's really this unified system. And I'll talk a little bit about, during their summit, they've also gone into, now they're going to start an OLTP with hybrid tables. And they're also they bought this company called Streamlit. So they're also doing data applications. So they're taking over a lot. And if you don't know about Snowflake, I was justified that I invested so much and I changed the consulting practice for it, because in 2020, when it had its IPO, it was the largest software IPO ever. The last one, I think, was VMware, which was like 8 or 10 years before. So it's huge market demand, a really large market capitalization. And it's also been the fastest startup company to $1 billion in revenue. So just to give you, those of you who are not as familiar with Snowflake or not the history, I'll talk about a little bit. It's invented by 3 founders. They're ex-Oracle. They really made a data warehouse, a database that handles structured and semi-structured data. By semi-structured data, I mean JSON, XML. And then they started to add more and more features. What I was involved with is they've created this data marketplace. So you just heard about all the guys who talk about SIMs, the security. So Snowflake has that type of offering too, but they have a bunch of other companies like Panther that run all their tools. Because of this technology with the no copying, which was a huge differentiator, they're able to offer these solutions that really nobody else can scale as well. And as they've expanded beyond 2020 and the data marketplace and replication to different clouds, they also have taken on, like I said, a lot of new workloads. So that, they're really pushing themselves now, as they've actually worked with Iceberg, if you're familiar with that technology. So they're making themselves not just a data warehouse and you have to load in the Snowflake. You already have external tables now, but they're even making with Iceberg tables. They're leveraging a lot of the technology to put in there, like they have time travel and other things that you're going to now be able to have true massive data lakes that before I wouldn't recommend Snowflake if you're multi-petabytes and you're talking about hundreds of terabytes per day. But now they're really going to be able to scale to that very easily by working with Iceberg table formats or file formats. The other thing they've done is, besides just structured and semi-structured, they've gone into unstructured. So, and with their Snowpark, they're really building this kind of like massive set of tools that you can run Snowpark, Python integrated, data analysis, all in one place. So they're really, in some ways, like I always find it hard with technology companies, like no one stays in their swim lanes anymore. Like Databricks comes over and does what Snowflake does, and Snowflake comes over what Databricks does. It's just what's happened. So anyway, here's, for those of you who haven't used Snowflake, why it's so differentiated and really better than anything else that's out there. Like I said, we built stuff on all the on-premise stuff. Teradata never really figured out how to leverage their technology and move it to the cloud. Netezza, IBM stopped that. They don't really have an offering. Oracle is never good in the cloud. That's kind of why these 3 guys that I show on the slide, these are the 3 founders. These 2 guys are ex-Oracle guys. And so the story goes that they actually went, I don't know, it was Ellison or somebody like 10 years ago and said, hey, the cloud's out here. We have an idea of how to basically build a database from the cloud ground up. So if you're familiar with the cloud, like AWS is the easiest example I know of. They basically figured out a way to separate storage and compute. And so they have this concept of t-shirt sizes, and you can just leverage up the compute. Your AT&T, you can have a 6XL. You can have 5,000 servers compute-wise running in parallel, but it's going to cost you like a few $1,000 an hour. So they've made it so it can scale at any level. Like this, any of you have done this a long time, this never was possible before. And so the other thing these 3 guys came up with was this micro partition technology, which mostly it's not that different from indexing, but it uses pruning And you can think of it as like different file structures where they're able to prune like what data to bring forward. But probably the most impactful thing is everything related to the no copy data cloning. Because they do write ahead with these micro partitions, they're able to basically use metadata to come back to a time and place. So they're able to use this for time travel, so you don't have to do backups like you used to do on any on-premise system. They're able to use this for data ops. Like we can never do agile data warehousing before. This is like a massive change. And there's really still nobody else that I know of that does it as well as they do. And then also one of the things I'm really passionate about is the data sharing. So when we did these consulting engagements and we made a lot of money off of it, we built all these pipelines from Ticketmaster to AG to Madison Square Garden, shipping files everywhere. Well, now with data sharing, you don't have to do that. It's just because of this micro partitioning technology, you can just go back in time and get to, well, there's also stuff that's part of the cost savings is you have to decide how much data you want to save, or you can have up to 90 days if you have an enterprise account. Like I said, the differentiators that I see, because I really haven't seen anybody else do this as well, is structured, semi-structured. The way they do JSON is really well done. The new unstructured. So now, like you can think about it, they can run like Python type analysis on documents and X-ray pictures and things like that, all on the same system. Snowpark is their, what I would say, like I said, Databricks ended up building Delta Lake, and it's not as good as Snowflake. But then Snowflake, I guess, long-term always had this idea of Snowpark, which really it does all the end-to-end Python data science workloads. And like I said, what happened, if any of you went to Summit 2022 in June, they come out with announcement of hybrid tables where they're going to take on OLTP, which I'm assuming most of you know, like transactional processing, what they were never good at before, versus OLAP, the analytical processing, which they're awesome. And then, like I said, the Streamlit app purchase, which I was thinking about it, it's kind of like, I guess, Oracle has forms. Those things always sucked. But in a way, they're making this advancement to not just be the database, but to be the database and applications. All right, so that was for all you who haven't used Snowflake. For those of you who have, like I said, it's amazing. I mean, I'm a pretty big advocate for it, but the only thing is the revenue model is driven off of consumption. And so you'll see as I go through these slides, a lot of their default settings and stuff, it's not highly optimized. And so that's why we built this optimization tool called Snoptimizer. And there's a few other players in the market who've done something similar. And also, I'll go through it. Like I said, consumption-based pricing is awesome until it's not. Like, I don't know any of you, like I bought a house a few years ago and we moved in and the people who left, they had a huge leak. So it's like we had a $2,000 water bill when we moved in. So all these things, it's not just water, electricity, anything that's consumption-based pricing is great. Like I said, it was game-changing, but if you don't have anything optimizing it or any guardrails, it's a mess. It can be horrible. Like these are real case studies of there was some company didn't know what they were doing. Guy lights up a huge warehouse and they're not connected, and they had a $50,000 a year budget and they spent it in 3 days. I mean, it's like there's probably at least 100 stories like this, but that's just the challenge with this. If you don't set it up correctly. So I'm joking here, but the data heroes to the rescue. So there's actually some stuff Snowflake's developed and they're getting better, but it's still not very well done. So we built these cost, performance, and security optimizations. So those of you who have used Snowflake, have you used the metadata, like the account usage data? Yeah, okay, good. So at least one person. So if you get into optimization, this is the place to go. That's really the main set of views. It's really a data share from Snowflake to you. and it has tons and tons of different metadata. For those of you who aren't familiar with Snowflake, it's just kind of a lot of noise, but you have the access history. They have all these different features, like automatic clustering is one of them. Materialized Views one of them, and it has all this warehouse. So the way they do consumption and the way you pay is through credits based on different size warehouses, which is really like, hey, how many EC2 instances are you going to light up in the background versus all the data is stored on S3 side. And then if you are interested in this and you're using it, I have a bunch of articles. I have Snowflake cost optimization best practices. And then if you're into this, this is just a start. Like when I started with Snowflake, there was really just storage, pipes. Yeah, that was pretty much, and query consumption, which is the bulk of everything. So now, as they've expanded, like I showed in their evolution, they have automatic clustering now, which was a way that they basically moved the data around to cluster those micro partitions so they're more optimized to be used. And then they have replication they did about 2 years ago where, like I said, now you can build something on the data marketplace and you can replicate across, there's like 10 AWS zone availability zones, and there's I don't know, there's like 3 Google, and there's probably like 7 Microsoft, because they started in AWS and they went to Azure and then went to Google. So that's it kind of follows that with how many of different regions they're on. So really, if you're into this, all these things, pipes, cloud services, materialized views, search optimization, they're really awesome, but they can be helpful, but they can also be misused. And that's really the other reason for optimization, because I've seen it too. People just light up, like they do something with materialized views and they don't understand that the views continues to be materializing when they keep adding data to it, like in a real time. So that'll start to add up in costs. And so this was just one, like case study we did when we used the automation tools. Is we had someone that was doing like $12,000 a month. And so we were able to save them, $1,800 by just applying these best practices and automations to it. Okay, so now we go, now we're going into the fun stuff, at least for the people who like use Snowflake. So I'm gonna just, I hope this is like useful, because I don't know if all of you will find it as interesting, but anybody who's really into this is, I'll just show some of the basic code. I gotta wear glasses for this. So like the first tip I had, and I can write up some of this code, or I guess it'll be distributed. So here is just like, I'm going through this tip number 1, right? So I don't know how many accounts, I've probably done over 100 health checks over the last 4 years. And I'm not kidding, like 50% of them don't have resource monitor set up. So it's like people get on the cloud and they don't do all the basic best practices. So I'm just gonna show something here. I don't think I just created this account today. So here's our warehouse. I didn't do anything to it. I'm gonna show you the warehouse. So there's the default compute one. So here's another thing that's annoying. So if you don't put in, initial status of the warehouse, it starts, and their default warehouse will run for 10 minutes. So this isn't as bad because the command line, see this auto suspend here, but it's just, I find these practices like weird. Like, I don't know, if I was Snowflake, and I'm so customer focused, I would improve this. So if you're familiar with this is a basic construct. It's not, there's other ways to do this too, because they have that metadata. But now I'm just going to show, like, this basically is like saying show warehouses, and then it takes the result scan from there. And then I have just a simple thing that says, hey, how many of these warehouses don't have any guardrails on them? So if people keep sending queries to them, every time that they finish, there's 600 seconds before it auto suspends. So if you're doing like data loads where there's no reason whatsoever to carry the cache, you're basically wasting 600, 599 seconds every time. Now, this doesn't matter as much when you're paying for an extra small that's, a few credits an hour. But if you have like a 6XL or a 4XL, you're talking about thousands of dollars. Well, you're talking about hundreds of dollars for 10 minutes. But if it keeps going, you do some of these other things, it gets worse and worse. So, like I said, we have a bunch of automations to do this, but here's like some tips. Like if you really wanted to, you could do the same thing where you could say, okay, you got these issues here. So I'm going to create, and I use like the best practices. Like I said, the next point that I'm saying is people actually don't, this is missing. People actually like also mess up setting up these resource monitors. But like I said, this is like best practice. You always want to do this. And notice too, there's two statements here. So what I did is I created a resource monitor, which they didn't even have. They have a default warehouse that you get to, which has no monitors whatsoever. And then I'm creating one for the new one I just did. So now I have these resource monitors that I've just created. And so what you should see here is that now at least something, there's some type of guardrails here, because before there was 2 rows, but now I have at least some type of guardrails. So that's pretty much it. I mean, with regards to, like, you always want to have, if you notice when I created it, you always want to have a resource monitor. My best practice is per warehouse. You can set up resource monitors for monthly, like different times, but I always do daily and I always do per warehouse, because otherwise you just leave too much room for cost. Really, like you're leaving yourself cost liability. Okay, so I'm gonna have to buzz through some of these things. So that's my tip number 1. And if you're really into Snowflake, I'll have some blog, or you can get the code for this. The other thing is, like I just was saying, with tip number 2 is other thing people do is just so I guess people just don't understand it, right? So I'm just messing around here, but I just created this warehouse, and this is almost like useless. This is basically doing like a monthly credit check of 100. So the problem is, if you have Snowflake and you just run it and you get a larger thing, you can go through 100 credits in a few hours. So if that was your allocation for a month, like, it's almost moronic to me that you even do this. And this is actually the default when you use the GUI. So here's another thing, I'm just like best practice or anti-patterns to watch out for. Is this is another, like, relatively not as bad as the last one, but it's, oh no, this one is bad. Like, so if you just have this, like, the other thing is people don't set up the notifications correct. So they have this 50% notify, 90% notify. Okay, so it's daily, that's good. But let's say I didn't look at my email or whatever. You can just basically blow through your costs like that. And then this one's more complicated, and it goes into my next issue or best practice is, oh, it's missing a piece of it. But this is another problem. So I just say 100% do suspend. So the problem is Snowflake by default actually sets up, so I'm just gonna go into tip 3. They actually, so let's say you have this query that for whatever reason runs and runs, or you messed up something, you do the Partition join, and it runs for 20 hours, and you have it on a big warehouse. The problem with this setting, with the suspend, is that only happens after the query is finished. So you have to have suspend immediately, because otherwise, by default, Snowflake runs the query for 48 hours before it times out. So this is another best practice is, look at your parameters. I already adjusted this one, but when you come onto it initially, it's 17 to 800, which is 48 hours. So again, this is like a really big, just bad guardrail, not set up correctly issue. So this is tip number 3. So the other thing is, like I said, and I gotta keep moving along, but I'm just pointing out here, this is like, you go in and you create a warehouse, like you don't know what you're doing, you're new. It creates an extra large, which is, I don't know, I don't understand why they're doing it. And then it suspends after 10 minutes. The other thing, so, and there's no way to stop it. So as soon as you create this warehouse, because you don't have the, like when you're doing code, the way to say, don't make it originally start, and you know what you're doing? You're creating something that's going to run for 10 minutes, and you don't do anything, and you're going to get 10 minutes of charge at extra large, which is probably a few hundred, maybe it's $100. It's not super cheap. It's just annoying that it's not set up. So hopefully you guys who are using this stuff, this is useful. And like I said, what I always say, if you're doing any optimizations or you're starting off, I mean, some people are just like, oh, I want to start with a 2XL. Or I always start off with workloads at extra small. I have customers, or I did, that they would run 20 extra smalls if they want to. The other thing that I didn't mention in the beginning, which is really transformational at Snowflake, is, so one of our initial customers, like 2018, is a retailer, and all these on-prem databases, one of the biggest problems they had was they have all these concurrency problems. So someone's trying to do reports, and they're trying to do the ETL load that takes like 4 hours. And so it's really just kind of a bad engineering situation. So Snowflake, because it's separating this compute and storage all this time, you have the marketing guys doing something here, you can have the data science guys doing something here. I mean, you can have all these warehouses, they're completely separate workloads. So you never have this, concurrency problems that you always had. And so it's pretty huge. Okay, so this next tip is just, if you're using cloud data storage, so you get charged, most of your costs almost all the time is consumption or one of those materialized views or auto clustering. But the issue is if, so this is a more complex example. So I'm just messing around. I just want you guys to understand like how this works. I don't have that stuff there. So, okay, I create this database. One of the things about Snowflake that's awesome is, you don't have to, like, if you did all these other databases, you have to think about this and that. You just pretty much can get going. So it creates this database, creates this table. Okay, so let's see what's happening with time travel. So this one I'm pretty sure I didn't reset. I have to actually have a warehouse going. So see how it says, okay, I just did this retention time. It's only a day. So that's not a big deal. Now, if someone resets it, or the other thing with Snowflake, I remember there's defaults. So you have this concept of a database. I mean, it's all logical. And then you have schemas within it. And then you have tables or views within the schema. So it's all in these containers. But remember, if you set stuff, so now the issue is if you drop and recreate and drop and recreate, or you do, you need to have time travel. So you're adding data and you're changing data. Because remember, it's micro partition. So it's just adding data. So deletes are actually create inserts to create the new partition. So the issue is that if you do this where you set it to 90 days of time travel, it's keeping all the changes for that, which could be, you can even have a small table that's like, I don't know, 1 terabyte, but some people have these drop and recreate scenarios, and all of a sudden they're spending, I don't know, $1,000 on storage, and they get like a $5,000 bill because they forget that they added this time travel to keep all that. And also the other thing, just a tip, is with Snowflake by default, you have to have it. It has to have 7 days fail-safe. So you're not only paying for the 90 days, you're paying for 7 additional days to do it. So again, like I was talking about this, the initially suspended equals true is really key. Otherwise, you're paying as soon as you create stuff. So people say, okay, this is great, but how do I optimize? So just like you can use these tools or techniques like I said, there's new reports that are coming out. There's manual optimizations. There's a quick start. the problem is with all the manual stuff, it's just harder, it's more cumbersome. And then again, you can, if you want to recreate this stuff, like you can have your own internal team. If you're Capital One, you got the resources to do it, but otherwise it's really difficult. And also you can use Snowflake professional services. Again, it's just, or you can hire Accenture, the guys I work part-time for. And plenty of other consultants do health checks and this. But again, I think it's just not as repeatable. And so what we've done is we came out with this tool, Snoptimizer. There's another one, another data superhero, Natalytics, Capital One. So we've basically just taken all these best practices that I'm showing you and made them repeatable. And it's just much easier than anything else. So we're running out of time. So basically the tools are, I can give you the code for this. Some of it's from the quick starts. We detect like heavy scans. One of the things with Snowflake, if you detect poor performance, is spilling detection. Let's say you also want to optimize your loads. So if you do this and you're using Snowflake, just remember, if you're using typical copy into, I usually do like 200, 250 megabytes. So that's what you want to do. If you want to do it those sizes, because if you use a gigabyte or use larger sizes, gigabyte's not horrible, but you're going to keep the thread running too long. And so it's really, you want to optimize it so it cuts it up and it distributes it. The other thing is, that's another anti-pattern, is people will start using Snowflake internal stages and they won't purge the files. So they'll load all this data in, and another thing, just sit there, terabytes of data, and they'll start having to pay for it. And it's already been loaded, they don't need it. So the thing to remember though with data loading too is each like extra small, it's like 8 threads, 16 threads or nodes. If you have 8 files, it doesn't make any sense to have anything bigger than an extra small. And it goes up by 8 each time. So you just have to remember, most of the time when you're loading, you don't want to have a bigger size warehouse unless you have thousands and thousands of files. And again, you know, when we deploy these automated optimizations, we're able to take queries that were running like 5 minutes to under 20 seconds. It's just, you're basically automating all the best practices. And then the other thing I see a lot is, because I'm running out of time, people just set up stages and they don't have, you know, the proper security set around them. They'll set up role-based access control, and it's just not done correctly. And also another big thing is like people start to create all these objects as account admin. It creates those problems. So again, we have scripts for all this, and we create automations for it that make it easier. So we've seen like 10 to 30% cost savings, tons of security issues fixed, and a lot of performance improvements. And then the other thing, if you're really into Snowflake and using it, they're coming out with resource groups. They're coming out with a capability to set cost limits at the resource groups to actually turn off things better at like from a dollar perspective. And then there's some new cost reports. Like I said, I think the SaaS-based solutions are by far the best. And I think I'm out of time just about, but if you're interested and you're really using Snowflake, contact me, or you want to join the Snowflake meetup. We have a free trial for Snoptimizer for the DataCon LA. And then if you're interested in Snowflake optimization resources, we have a whole list of different resources, not just what we're doing, but other data superheroes and Snowflake, other pieces around that as well. So I think I'm the only thing standing between you and whatever this networking reception is. Any questions? Like, is everybody still awake, largely? But honestly, for those of you who haven't used Snowflake, if you want to understand it a little better, I'm happy to explain things, but it really has been a game changer, and it's been pretty amazing how much it's grown. And so, like I said, and if you are using Snowflake, you know, take a look at the free trial, see what you think. Oh yeah, all right.
the Snowflake marketplace. How do you think the Snowflake customers are using the marketplace? Are they taking advantage of that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, they're really like I help them design parts of it and stuff. And I think, I mean, from all their stuff and the summit, it's really taking off. They have this one picture where they started about 2 years ago and now, and it's like all these different connections. I don't know though, like they don't really disclose like how much is being used. But it seems to be there. I mean, all I can tell you from the big financial institutions, like the ones the guy who's doing the graph was mentioning, there's a lot of those big players coming over to Snowflake, and a lot of them are using like the finance data like FactSet. The only thing I don't know is like, I have a data share on the data marketplace. So when I first launched it, I had a lot of interest, but now there's just so many things that I don't know if you're not a big brand like you guys, I would think would get a lot of traction, but if you're not a huge brand, I don't know if you do, like, unless you have something interesting. Like the guys who made really did well was the Star Schema that had the COVID data. So that's really taken off. I mean, I know the weather data, and there's certain big brands on there that's definitely working, but it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then again, it's like the Apple Store, right? When I made apps for that a long time ago or something, like, once there's so many out there, I think it ends up being that, top 20% are probably doing most of the workloads or the connections. All right, well, no one else has any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for great insights and also breadth of knowledge that you have. Thank you everyone for joining us, and this is the end of the,
Yeah, we made it through the day. We survived.
So thank you so much, and I can't wait for next year. So.